When wildfires swept through LA, the world blamed nature. Barron Trump, however, discovered something far more sinister. In early January 2025, Los Angeles found itself under siege as relentless wildfires tore through the region. The flames, driven by fierce Santa Ana winds, consumed vast swaths of land, leaving devastation in their wake. Over 10,000 structures were reduced to ash, and the fires claimed at least 11 lives, forcing more than 180,000 residents to flee their homes. Amidst this chaos, the Trump family had traveled to California for a series of engagements. Barron Trump, now 18 and a freshman at New York University, accompanied his parents on this trip, while his father, President Donald Trump, attended a fundraiser in the Los Angeles area. Barron found himself with time to explore the city. As the wildfires intensified, the city's air grew thick with smoke, casting an eerie orange hue over the skyline. Barron, intrigued by the unfolding disaster, began to follow news reports and social media updates closely. He noted the widespread destruction in areas like Pacific Palisades, where multi-million-dollar homes were reduced to rubble, and the historic Will Rogers Ranch was lost to the flames. But something caught his attention, an unusual pattern in the locations where the fires had ignited. While most people focused on the sheer scale of the disaster, Barron noticed that the ignition points seemed to align in a peculiar trajectory, almost as if following a deliberate path. This observation sparked his curiosity, compelling him to delve deeper into the available data and reports. He began by mapping the reported ignition sites, using public information from news outlets and official fire department releases. The more he plotted, the clearer the pattern became. The fires appeared to have started in a sequence that suggested more than just random occurrences or the result of natural causes. Barron shared his findings with his parents, who, though preoccupied with their commitments, encouraged him to pursue his curiosity, but advised caution. Undeterred, he reached out to local authorities and fire experts, hoping to share his observations and gain further insight. However, his inquiries were met with skepticism. Officials were overwhelmed with managing the crisis and had little time to entertain theories from an 18-year-old, regardless of his background. Some dismissed his observations as mere coincidences, while others assured him that the professionals were handling the situation. Despite the dismissals, Barron's conviction grew stronger. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was a deliberate hand behind the disaster. Determined to uncover the truth, he decided to investigate further on his own, unaware of the dangers and challenges that lay ahead. But as Barron delved deeper into the mystery, he would soon find himself entangled in a web of secrets that some would go to great lengths to keep hidden. The scale of destruction caused by the wildfires was unlike anything Los Angeles had seen in years. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to smoldering ruins, and thick smoke turned daylight into a dim, apocalyptic haze. Emergency shelters were overflowing, with displaced families recounting harrowing escapes from the advancing flames. In areas like Malibu and Calabasas, luxury estates that once stood as symbols of wealth and security were now indistinguishable piles of ash and rubble. Streets were eerily silent, except for the hum of fire trucks and helicopters dropping water on the infernos. Wildlife, too, suffered immensely, with thousands of acres of habitat destroyed and animals fleeing to suburban backyards in desperation. For the residents, the situation felt hopeless. The wildfires, fanned by gusts exceeding 60 miles per hour, were spreading faster than containment efforts could keep up. Firefighters, already exhausted from battling previous blazes, worked around the clock. Images of them collapsing from sheer exhaustion became symbolic of the human cost behind the heroic efforts to control the fires. Barron, meanwhile, was deeply affected by the stories he encountered. During a visit to an evacuation center in Santa Monica, he overheard a tearful mother recounting how she had just minutes to grab her children and escape before their home was consumed by flames. Another man showed Barron a photo of his prized vintage car collection, now just a pile of scorched metal. But what stuck with Barron most was a firefighter's story about the odd timing and locations of the fires. "It's almost like they've got a mind of their own," the man said, shaking his head. "I've been doing this for 20 years and I've never seen anything like it. Some of these fires seem to ignite out of nowhere, in places you'd never expect." These remarks solidified Barron's belief that there was more to the wildfires than met the eye. He couldn't help but think back to the strange alignment of ignition points he'd noticed earlier. Determined to learn more, he spent hours combing through online forums and social media, where he discovered posts from others who had also observed unusual fire patterns. Some speculated that the fires were the result of arson, while others floated more sinister theories, including corporate sabotage and attempts at forced land acquisition. One thread in particular caught Barron's attention. A user had uploaded drone footage of an area just outside Pasadena, showing what appeared to be an initial spark from an object falling from the sky moments before the fire erupted. The video, though grainy, was enough to make Barron's pulse quicken. He saved it immediately, wondering if this could be the evidence he needed to prove his growing suspicions. But the more Barron uncovered, the more dangerous the questions became, pulling him into a maze of uncertainty that offered no easy way out. As night fell over Los Angeles, Barron sat in his hotel room with his laptop glowing in the dim light. His desk was cluttered with hastily scribbled notes, screenshots from social media posts, and a crude map of the wildfire spread. He stared intently at the drone footage he'd downloaded earlier, replaying it frame by frame. The object in question, a small bright flare, appeared for only a split second before vanishing into the brush. Moments later, the flames erupted. It was eerie. While many wildfires are sparked by lightning, faulty power lines, or carelessness, this footage hinted at something unnatural. Barron cross-referenced the footage with news articles and fire department updates, marking the ignition points on his map. Each dot lined up with disturbing precision, forming a path that stretched from rural areas to densely populated neighborhoods. Barron's curiosity turned into obsession. He dove into public records, tracing recent land purchases in fire-affected areas. A pattern emerged. Properties in high-risk zones had been quietly acquired by a handful of corporations in the months leading up to the fires. Barron noted the names of the companies, most of which were shell entities with little information available online. The deeper he dug, the more questions arose. One corporation in particular caught his attention, Solvista Holdings. The company's name appeared multiple times in recent transactions for properties that had been destroyed by the fires. What stood out was that the purchases were made at inflated prices, an odd move for areas prone to natural disasters. Barron felt the weight of what he was uncovering. He called his older sister Ivanka to share his findings. "It just doesn't add up," he explained. "Why would anyone pay so much for land in fire zones unless they knew something we didn't?" Ivanka listened patiently but remained cautious. "Barron, this sounds serious, but be careful. If you're right, this could involve powerful people who don't want to be exposed." Her warning only fueled his resolve. The next day, Barron drove out to one of the affected areas, hoping to see the aftermath firsthand. What he found left him shaken. Amid the charred remains of homes and businesses, there were signs of anomalies. In one neighborhood, a line of trees stood untouched, while the houses around them were reduced to ashes. In another, a concrete wall bore scorch marks on one side, but the other was mysteriously clean. Barron took photos of everything, cataloging each detail meticulously. But as he walked through the ruins, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. A black SUV idled at the edge of the street, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. It didn't belong to any emergency responders. Of that he was certain. Ignoring the unease, Barron continued his documentation, determined not to let fear deter him. He uploaded his findings to a secure cloud drive, making sure to back up everything. Later that evening, he shared his discoveries on a private forum, hoping to connect with others who might have noticed the same irregularities. Responses poured in almost immediately. Some users thanked him for bringing attention to the anomalies, while others provided similar accounts from different parts of California. But one reply stood out, a cryptic message that read, "You're closer to the truth than you think. Be careful who you trust." Barron didn't know it yet, but his investigation was beginning to draw the attention of people who were far from friendly. The cryptic message stuck with Barron as he sat alone in his room that night. The flicker of excitement he'd felt earlier now gave way to an uneasy awareness of how high the stakes could be. He reviewed his findings again, noting how each piece of evidence pointed to something deliberate. something orchestrated. But by whom and why? Those questions loomed over him like shadows he couldn't escape. The next morning, Barron decided to take his investigation offline, fearing his digital trail might already have been compromised. Armed with a burner phone and a notebook, he set out to interview local residents in some of the hardest-hit areas. He started in Agora Hills, where several homes had been destroyed. Many evacuees were still camped out at temporary shelters, relying on donated supplies and waiting for updates about their properties. Barron approached an older man named Jack, who sat on a folding chair outside a community center. Jack had lived in the area for decades and had seen his fair share of wildfires. "This one's different," Jack told Barron, his voice hoarse from days of breathing in smoky air. "Fires don't usually burn this way. They're erratic, sure, but this was like a straight shot." When Barron asked about Sol Vista Holdings, Jack's demeanor shifted. "Yeah, I've heard the name," he said cautiously. "They've been poking around here for months, buying up properties left and right. People didn't think much of it at first, until the fires started." Jack's words sent a chill through Barron. He thanked the man and moved on, but similar stories began to emerge as he spoke with more residents. Several recalled seeing strange activity in the days leading up to the fires. Low-flying drones, unmarked utility trucks, and even a few loud booms at odd hours of the night. Barron's next stop was the city of Thousand Oaks, where he met a woman named Elena who had been evacuated from her family's ranch. She showed him a series of photos she'd taken on her phone, including one that caught Barron's attention immediately. A burn site with scorched earth in perfect circles, as if something had exploded in multiple places simultaneously. Elena hesitated before handing over another photo. It was blurry but unmistakable. A drone hovering over her property equipped with what looked like a small canister attached to its underside. "I tried reporting this to the authorities," she said, "but they said they were too overwhelmed to investigate. I don't think they cared." Barron felt a pit in his stomach as he pieced the clues together. Could drones have been used to start the fires? The thought seemed far-fetched but not impossible, especially given the precision of the ignition points. He decided to dig deeper into Sol Vista Holdings, starting with their leadership. That evening, he visited the downtown Los Angeles Public Library, where he accessed corporate filings and news archives. The CEO of Sol Vista Holdings was a man named Victor Grayson, a relatively low-profile figure with ties to several other energy and real estate companies. Barron uncovered lawsuits against Grayson for environmental violations, including illegal fracking operations and land contamination. One article described Grayson's aggressive push for land redevelopment projects in wildfire-prone areas, often lobbying for relaxed regulations to fast-track construction after fires. The more Barron learned, the clearer the picture became. The fires weren't just a tragedy, they were an opportunity. If someone could clear large swaths of land quickly, they could rebuild at enormous profit. But as Barron gathered more information, he couldn't ignore the growing sense that he was being followed. The black SUV had reappeared earlier that day, parked near the library's entrance when he arrived. And now, as he left with a folder full of documents, he saw it again, slowly trailing him as he walked to his car. Barron was getting closer to the truth, but the closer he got, the more dangerous his mission became. Barron's heart pounded as he drove through the darkened streets of Los Angeles. The black SUV was still in his rearview mirror, its headlights an ominous presence. He had to think quickly. Taking a series of sharp turns, he weaved through side streets and alleys, eventually pulling into a crowded parking garage. He parked near the exit and ducked behind a pillar, watching as the SUV cruised past without stopping. Relieved, but shaken, Barron clutched the folder of documents he had retrieved from the library. The evidence gathered was damning, but he wasn't sure how to proceed. Who could he trust with this information? The authorities had already dismissed him, and sharing it online might only put him in more danger. Barron decided to reach out to someone with more resources, a journalist. He remembered a respected investigative reporter named Linda Moreno, known for exposing corruption and corporate malfeasance. After a few quick searches, he found her contact information and sent her an encrypted email summarizing what he had uncovered. The next day, Linda agreed to meet Barron at a cafe in Pasadena. She listened intently as he laid out the timeline of the fires, the suspicious land purchases, and the potential involvement of Solvista Holdings. "This is big," she said, her tones. "If what you're saying is true, this could implicate some very powerful people." Linda promised to help Barron verify his findings and offered to use her connections to dig deeper into Solvista's activities. But she also warned him, "These kinds of stories can make enemies. Be careful, Barron. You're in over your head." Their conversation was interrupted by a loud crash outside. Barron turned to see a car speeding away, its tires screeching as it rounded the corner. Linda's face grew pale. "That's no coincidence," she said. "We need to move." Over the next few days, Linda and Barron worked tirelessly to uncover more evidence. Linda used her sources to obtain internal emails from Solvista, which revealed plans to lobby for expedited rebuilding permits in fire-affected areas. One email in particular caught their attention. A message from Victor Grayson to a colleague discussing accelerating the timeline and ensuring sites are cleared. The implications were clear. Someone was intentionally starting the fires to force residents out and make way for redevelopment projects. The sheer audacity of the scheme left Barron and Linda both furious and determined to expose the truth. But their efforts didn't go unnoticed. One evening, as Barron returned to his hotel, he found his room ransacked. Papers were scattered, drawers were open, and his laptop was missing. A single note lay on the desk: "Stop digging." Barron immediately called Linda, who urged him to stay with her until they could figure out their next move. "They're trying to scare you," she said, "but this just confirms we're onto something." Despite the threats, they pressed on. Linda began drafting a bombshell exposé, weaving together the evidence they had gathered. The story was set to reveal the full extent of Solvista's corruption and the deliberate destruction of communities for profit. But as the deadline approached, Barron couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The walls were closing in, and Barron knew that exposing the truth would come at a cost, one he wasn't sure he was ready to pay. The day Linda's article was set to publish, Barron woke up to an alert on his burner phone. The encrypted email account he had been using to communicate with Linda had been compromised. Someone had accessed the drafts they were working on. Panicked, he called Linda, but the line went straight to voicemail. Unease crept over him as he grabbed his things and headed to her apartment. When Barron arrived, he found Linda's door slightly ajar. Inside, her workspace was in disarray. The walls that had been covered with notes and printouts about Solvista Holdings were stripped bare. Her laptop, camera, and notebooks were gone. A single sticky note was left behind on her desk. In bold, block letters it read, "You've been warned." Barron's heart raced. Linda was gone, and so was most of the evidence they had gathered. The only backup remained on Barron's encrypted cloud storage, but he knew it wouldn't stay safe for long. He immediately left the apartment, clutching the folder of documents he had kept with him at all times. Desperate for help, Barron decided to contact his father. Though he had been reluctant to involve his family, the situation had escalated beyond what he could handle alone. "Dad," he said over the phone, his voice trembling, "I need your help. This is bigger than I thought." Donald Trump, known for his connections and influence, listened intently as Barron explained the depth of what he had uncovered. "You've got guts, kid," his father finally said. "But you're right, this is dangerous. I'll make a few calls, but you need to keep your head down. And Barron, don't trust anyone." That same day, Barron received an encrypted message from an unknown sender. It contained an attachment labeled Proof of Operation Phoenix. The file included damning evidence, detailed plans for orchestrating the fires, complete with schematics for the drones and emails from top executives at Solvista discussing payouts to complicit officials. The message ended with a chilling line, "Release this, and you'll never see daylight again." Barron knew he couldn't keep this to himself. He forwarded the file to Linda's editor at the investigative outlet she worked for, along with the story they had drafted before her disappearance. Within hours, the story broke across major news networks. The exposé laid bare the calculated destruction of entire communities for financial gain, implicating Solvista Holdings and several high-ranking officials in California. The public reaction was explosive. Protests erupted outside Solvista's headquarters, demanding justice for the families displaced by the fires. Federal authorities launched an investigation, and Victor Grayson's face became a symbol of greed and corruption. But the fallout wasn't without its costs. Barron's life was turned upside down as he became a target of scrutiny and media attention. His father's advisors warned him to stay out of the spotlight, but Barron refused to back down. "People need to know the truth," he told reporters in one of his few public appearances. Despite the threats and challenges, Barron's actions led to sweeping reforms in how land acquisitions were regulated in wildfire-prone areas. Solvista's assets were frozen, and several of its executives were indicted. Victor Grayson, however, remained at large, reportedly fleeing the country to avoid prosecution. But even as justice began to take shape, Barron couldn't forget the warning he had received. The shadow of those behind the operation loomed large, a reminder that exposing the truth often comes with a heavy price. In the weeks following the exposé, the world watched as the fallout from the scandal unfolded. News anchors detailed the investigations into Solvista Holdings, the arrests of complicit officials, and the growing movement to reform wildfire prevention and response strategies. For the first time, the public began to see the fires not as an uncontrollable natural disaster, but as a deliberate, calculated act of greed. Barron, however, stayed out of the limelight. The initial media frenzy around his involvement had made him a household name, but it also brought threats and harassment. For his safety, his family arranged for him to leave Los Angeles and relocate to a secure location until the situation calmed. While Barron appreciated the gesture, he struggled with the weight of everything he had uncovered. He spent his days reflecting on the lives that had been destroyed by the fires. Families who had lost their homes, firefighters who had risked their lives, and communities that would never be the same. Yet, amidst the tragedy, there was a sense of hope. Barron had seen firsthand how ordinary people could make a difference, even when the odds were stacked against them. One afternoon, Barron received an email from a woman he had met at one of the shelters. Her family's home had been destroyed in the fires, but thanks to the public outcry and donations sparked by the exposé, they were able to rebuild. "Thank you for what you did," the email read. "You gave us hope when we thought we had none." The message reaffirmed Barron's belief in the power of truth. While his journey had been fraught with danger, it had also shown him the importance of standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. He realized that his actions had sparked more than just outrage. They had inspired change. In the months that followed, new legislation was passed to regulate land purchases in high-risk areas, ensuring stricter oversight and accountability. A task force was also established to investigate the use of drones and other technologies in criminal activities. These measures wouldn't undo the damage that had been done, but they were a step toward preventing future tragedies. Barron's experience left a lasting impression on him. He decided to channel his energy into activism, using his platform to advocate for environmental justice and corporate accountability. Though his life had been forever changed by the events surrounding the wildfires, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. But Barron knew this wasn't just his fight. "The truth matters," he said in an interview months later, "and it's up to all of us to make sure it comes to light." The story of the Los Angeles wildfires is a reminder of the power of courage and conviction. In a world where greed and corruption often go unchecked, it takes individuals willing to ask the hard questions to uncover the truth. If Barron's story inspired you, consider what actions you can take to make a difference in your own community. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more stories that matter. Together, we can shine a light on the issues that deserve attention.